Jim Bowman will provide some background information on 6 public education issues. His comments will provide background and focus for the questions to the candidates on this important issue. Jim has a bachelor's in engineering degree from the University of Kansas, a master's in statistics, and an MBA from the University of Michigan, and he's also served in Vietnam. For the past 20 years, Jim has operated a consulting business named James Bauman Associates. And prior to consulting, Jim was Director of Quality Assurance at Domini Paper in Kaukauna. 2 years ago, Jim was elected to the Appleton School Board, and he is a member of the Fox Cities Advocates for Public Education.
My role is to set the stage for tonight's forum. Since the candidates will address some important issues in public education, I'd like to update you on 6 of them. The background I provide will help you consider and evaluate the candidates' remarks. My 6 updates will explain funding for K-12 schools, funding for special education, the expansion of school choice vouchers, accountability for schools in the school choice voucher program, Common Core, and the achievement gap. My comments have not been shared with any of the candidates. Let me preface the 6 issues with the sentence in the Wisconsin Constitution that addresses K-12 schools. It reads, "The legislature shall provide by law for the establishment of district schools which shall be as nearly uniform as practicable. Such schools shall be free and without charge for tuition to all children between the ages of 4 and 20 years. Now the 6 issues. Your handout summarizes my comments. Issue 1 is funding for K-12 schools. The candidates elected to the next legislature will need to update the revenue limit and thereby determine how much funding school districts will receive. Let's briefly review how this revenue limit works. School districts receive most of their funding from 2 sources, state aid and local property taxes. On average, they get 46% of their funds from the state and 41% from property taxes. The first source, that's state aid, varies between districts based on residential property value. Districts in which the property wealth per pupil is low are less able to raise funds through property taxes. They therefore receive more state aid. Property-rich districts receive less. The amount of state aid provided to each district is determined by an equalization formula. Again, there are 2 sources of funding, state aid and local property taxes. The legislature limits the sum of these 2 sources with a revenue limit or cap. The purpose is to contain property taxes. Each district has a limit or cap assigned to it. Beginning with the 2009-2010 budget, however, annual adjustments to this revenue limit have not kept pace with inflation. So relative to costs, revenue to school districts has been reduced. You can evaluate the candidates on issue number 1. How will they update the revenue limit for school districts? Issue 2 is funding for special education. Currently, funding for special education falls short of costs. Let me explain that. Special ed means that we educate students with special needs in a way that fits their individual needs. These special needs include disabilities that affect learning, communication, emotions, and behavior. Consider, for example, dyslexia. It undermines a child's ability to write, read, and spell. A dyslexic child might still speak in baby talk at age 5. He might mispronounce words so that spaghetti is pronounced piscetti. An animal becomes aminal. While others in his class move ahead, the dyslexic kid falls behind. Kids with dyslexia need a teacher, tutor, or therapist, specially trained in multi-sensory, structured language approaches. State and federal law require that local school districts provide special ed and related services to kids with disabilities aged 3 through 20. Statewide, 14% of our kids have special ed needs. Since these kids need more individualized instruction, the teacher-to-student ratio is reduced and costs per student increase. Aid for special education from the state, however, does not cover these costs. Since 2001, state aid has covered only 26% of special ed costs. Since 2009, the aid has been frozen. The question for each candidate: how will you deal with the unreimbursed costs for special education that our school districts currently bear? Issue 3 is the expansion of school choice vouchers. Currently, any student whose family income falls below the prescribed ceiling is eligible for a school choice voucher at taxpayer expense if the student attends a private or parochial school or plans to transfer to one. This year, the program cap outside of Milwaukee and Racine is 1,000 students. Some legislatures have announced plans to eliminate the cap. The original goal of Milwaukee's voucher program, created in 1990, was to improve achievement. Studies by the Department of Public Instruction, by the Nonpartisan Legislative Audit Bureau, and by school choice supporters have, however, found no difference in performance between voucher students and public school students. The Milwaukee program also shows that voucher schools do not enroll special needs kids in significant numbers. The result, special needs kids and the costs of educating them are more concentrated in public schools. The controversy now centers on parental choice and cost rather than student achievement. And some legislators are asking questions. Senator Luther Olson, for example, who is chair of the Senate Education Committee, has stated, the question is, what is the purpose of this program? Is it a program to help poor kids get out of public schools, or is it a program to pay for the tuition of kids who are already in private schools? It's pretty obvious from the last two go-arounds that it's the latter. That's from Senator Olson. Our experience so far is of voucher applicants, 2/3 already attend a private or parochial school. So the question for the candidates, how will they address the voucher issue? Issue 4 is accountability for schools and the school choice voucher program. Requirements for accountability to taxpayers are not consistent between public and private schools. Voucher schools are not subject to the state's open meetings or open records laws. Those schools do not receive school report cards, nor are they included in the state's accountability system. Voucher schools are not included in the state's educator effectiveness system, and their teachers are not required to be licensed or certified. Public schools must meet all of those requirements. Since schools in the school choice program are funded by taxpayers, will they be required to meet the same standards as public schools? Issue 5 is Common Core. Educational standards define what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. Curriculum is different. Curriculum consists of books, software, and teaching methods. Standards are what a student must know. Curriculum is how students will learn in order to meet the standards. School districts in Wisconsin set curriculum. The Common Core state standards are a product of an educational reform movement that began in the 1990s. The objective is to raise academic standards and graduation requirements improve assessments, and strengthen accountability throughout the United States. The standards detail what K through 12 students should know in English language arts and mathematics at the end of each grade. The initiative is sponsored by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers. 45 states, including Wisconsin and the District of Columbia, have chosen to adopt them. Recently, though, several states have opted out. Common Core is more rigorous than standards of the past. In reading, there's an increased level of complexity as students advance through grades. Greater comprehension is expected so that students gain more from what they read. In writing, for example, the standards require logical arguments based on claims, solid reasoning, and relevant evidence. In mathematics, there's an emphasis on problem solving, abstract reasoning, constructing viable arguments, and critiquing the reasoning of others. Getting the right answer is no longer adequate. Students must also understand the process by which the answer was found. School boards are not required to adopt the standards, but most in Wisconsin have, including the Appleton School Board. Districts have developed curriculum and are now testing student learning to these standards. So for the candidates, do you support Common Core, or do you have another approach? Issue number 6, our last one, is the achievement gap. The achievement gap is the persistent disparity of student outcomes between groups defined by socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, and gender. This disparity exists in test scores, grade point average, dropout rates, and college enrollment and completion rates. The achievement gap between lower income and higher income students is not confined to the United States. It's worldwide. Here in Wisconsin, the achievement gap is not limited to Milwaukee. It also exists here in the Fox Valley, where the populations of lower income families and minority students are increasing. Research suggests that schools, life at home, and in the local community all influence student outcomes and contribute to the gap. Home and community influences are particularly significant because students spend more time at home and in their communities than they do at school. The issues that affect children in poverty, one-parent families, lack of role models, inadequate medical care, poor nutrition, those issues also undermine learning, and they accompany kids wherever they go. There is progress. One Wisconsin school requires its lowest performing kids to take an extra math class and an extended English class. All incoming 10th grade students attend mandatory summer school. Other schools emphasize strong literacy programs that target struggling children early. One school formed a literacy team with a reading specialist, literacy counselor, and an interventionist to help the kids. State School Superintendent Tony Evers says that many of the successful techniques come down to meaningful relationships between teachers and students, between adults in the school, and between the school staff and parents. Is there a role for the legislature in reducing this achievement gap? Now you're up to date on 6 key issues. Thank you for your attention. Let's proceed with the forum.
Thank you very much, Jim. Usually we begin with an introduction kind of thing, but in lieu of this being an education forum, I would ask that you would introduce yourself and briefly describe your own school experience and how you are currently connected with community schools. And we're going to start that one with Penny.
I represent a neighborhood paper. you. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. I'm State Representative Penny Bernard Shaver. My education experience is extremely varied. I am from a parochial school from kindergarten through 8th grade. I was there because my family wanted me to go there, and we had 11 children, and they never thought that the state government should help pay that tuition. I then went to a public high school, and then I went to technical college, then I went to public university, and then I went to a private university. I have been a physical therapist in the school district in Oshkosh, so I have some intimate knowledge of how the school district works. And I am connected to my schools because I live about a block away from Edison School right here in Appleton. I spend some time every year going to 4th grade classes. I also go every year to school board meetings and take time to make sure that I know the people on the school board and get to know the people in the classroom. So that's what I do to make sure that we have a good connection from my legislative position to the schools. I think schools are extremely important, and that is our job as a state legislature to focus in on the public schools and make sure they're the best that they can be. And that means all the way up through the technical college system, the 2-year college system, and the UW system. So we'll get to the other points as we go along. So here you go.
Thank you. I'm Roger Roth, running for the state senate, also in the 19th Senate District. I just want to thank the league for putting this forum together. I want to thank Jim for those kind, nonpartisan remarks on education issues. I think it's important for legislators to, people aspiring, just to hear from people who know it and have seen it firsthand. So I appreciate that as well. I've also had a varied background when it comes to education. I lived right across the street from my elementary school in Nash, Geegan Elementary School. We were the Geegan Roadrunners. Our song said that we will amaze you. And I like to think that we did. I just ran into, incidentally, my principal just campaigning last week. I said, "You look familiar. Were you a principal at Geegan Elementary?" And he said, "You got it." So I know that our former teachers are out there, and it's always exciting to see them. You never forget the teachers you had in elementary school. So I went to Geegan Elementary School. Then I went to Seton Middle School, Catholic school when it first opened. Went to St. Mary's Central High School, and went to college at UW Oshkosh. Took a semester over in England at a Catholic university there, and then finished up back at University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. I think one of the charges we have as legislators is to make sure that we have a thriving public education system. I think our goal ought to be that the kids that we are graduating from school are equipped to handle all of the challenges facing them in the ever-changing world that we live in. And that's why I think it's important for us to make sure that whatever we do when it comes to, look at all these issues we talked about here today, whatever we do, we want to make sure that we're putting the interests of those children first. Make sure that they have, again, the tools and the education necessary to help them succeed in life.
Well, good evening. My name is Jeff McCabe, and I am running for the Assembly in the 5th District. I too would like to thank the league for sponsoring this forum. I went to a Catholic grade school in my hometown, which is Kaukauna, where I've been raised my whole life, still live there, through 8th grade. And from there I went to Kaukauna High School, so I appreciate the orange sign. Thank you very much. So, and then from there, I went to the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, where I graduated with a bachelor's degree in social work. And I became more involved in education when my kids were in school. I went to a meeting when I learned they were talking about doing some strategic planning for the Kaukauna School District, and I thought that was pretty interesting. So I went to the meeting, and they talked about how we're going to set how our school's going to interact with the community. We want to get the community's input and how we can improve our education here in Kaukauna. So I said, that's something I want to be involved in. So I volunteered to be on one of the committees. And they said, well, actually we could use someone with some facilitation skills. Would you mind facilitating one of the groups? So I co-facilitated one of the groups of the strategic planning. Shortly after that, they said, well, we really could use somebody on the school board. We were very interested, so would you be willing to do that? So I ran for the school board and did that for 15 years. Spent 9 of them as president. And right now, my connection is I have a 4-year granddaughter in pre-K, and it's pretty cool to go to school and pick her up and watch her come running out, go, Grandpa!
Well, hi everybody. My name is Jim Steinke. I currently represent the 5th Assembly District. I want to thank the league as well, and I especially thank all of you for turning out tonight. I think it's an incredibly important issue, something that I think the legislature is committed to improving education in Wisconsin. We're very fortunate. In Wisconsin, we have a great education system already, so improving on that is only going to help everybody. My connection to public education, I've been connected to it pretty much my whole life. I went to public schools from kindergarten through 12th grade at the knee of my dad. My dad was an industrial arts teacher in the public schools for 30 years. So I grew up in his classroom. I grew up watching him in his teaching printing and photography and lithography and woodworking and everything else. And it was a struggle for me as I saw him go through his career as he got older to see his budget for his particular line of work at the schools continually cut over the course of the years. I think that's a mistake that we made a couple of decades ago. We started to move away from industrial education, and I think that was a detriment to a lot of kids out there. From there, I went on to college at UW-Milwaukee and UW-Oshkosh, and then got married. I happened to marry a beautiful young lady that is an educator herself, and she actually teaches a block away from Penny's house in Edison Elementary. Yeah, and it really gives you a unique perspective as somebody who grew up with a teacher in a household to see how much work he went through and how much time he spent away from us at school preparing his lesson plans, and then to see the dedication of my wife in the schools and to see how much time that takes from our family and how much devotion she has, and just see the struggles that she goes through on a daily basis, gives you a different perspective.
Thank you, Jim. Hi, I'm Mike Rohrkast, and I'm running for the 55th District State Assembly. And again, thank you to the league for sponsoring this, and thank you for everybody for coming out. I know it's a busy world out there, so appreciate your attendance this evening. My education experience is varied. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and I went to Catholic schools, and my mom thought that was important both from a strong education and because we grew up in the Catholic Church. And I know that my mom was a single parent, and we struggled to make ends meet, and so putting us through private parochial school was a significant challenge, and if it wasn't for the church and for many families that helped her out, because there was really no assistance back then, it would have been even a bigger struggle for putting my brother and I through Catholic schools. I ended up going to college, though, and went to Michigan State University. I graduated with both a bachelor's and a master's degree from there. So I learned the value of education, and it provided me a very strong foundation for a very successful career in business. My wife and I have raised 2 kids here in the Fox Cities, and we've had the pleasure really of using multiple schools here in the area. We've used public special needs schools for one of our sons when he was very young. We've used Fox Valley Christian Academy, a private school, which I was also on the school board. I was a school board member of them as well. And then our kids have used the public high schools. Our older son graduated Neenah High. Younger son goes to Appleton West Charter School. So I'm very familiar with all the different options. And then last, just in my business career, I've worked a lot with Fox Valley Technical College and the UW systems in terms of worker training, job training. So again, very familiar with both with the education systems at all levels. They're foundational for a good community.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate the attention. I'm Mark Westfall, candidate for the 55th Assembly District. I believe my educational experiences are pretty typical of most people. I graduated from Neenah High School. I went through the Neenah public school system all my life. Graduated in 1977. That means I'm old. And I was an honors graduate back then. I went to work after high school, was fortunate enough to earn an apprenticeship, so I spent 5 years at NWTC, Northeast Wisconsin Technical College in Green Bay, where I got my indentureship as a journeyman electrician and instrumentationist. I've also been connected to education in other various ways. My mother was the secretary of Clayton School when I was going to grade school there, so I always had to be on my best behavior. And my children attended the public school in Neenah, and now my granddaughter started first grade this year. So, and I also live across from Hoover School, right across, so I'm close to education. I also serve on the Fox Valley Workforce Development Board, and we are always talking about job training, the skills gap, and what our workers need to have to be able to be employed in our area, and what employers are looking for from their employees as far as skills and their ability to perform their job. We cannot survive in Wisconsin without investing and keeping our education system strong, K through the technical colleges and the UW system. Wisconsin has always been known for its strong education system. It what gave us a competitive advantage for so many years, and I think we started to lose a little bit of that. We need to regain that, make sure we stay up #1 in graduation rates and SAT and ACT scores. That's what will drive businesses to Wisconsin, that's what will keep people employed, and that's what will drive innovation for the future.
My name is Chris Klein. I'm running for the 57th Assembly District. My connection with the schools, both my parents are retired school teachers. My mom retired from Milwaukee Public Schools, and my dad retired from Brown Deer Schools. I grew up in Brown Deer, went to public schools. I went to, after high school, I went to UW Oshkosh. Both of my kids went to public schools and parochial. My daughter is now in college at UW Oshkosh, and my son went to college in Minnesota. When the kids were younger, I was involved with school, participating with whatever was necessary, whatever they needed. I coached youth sports, and I continue to be involved with my community. Right now, Menasha is in the playoffs in football. And I was talking about this afternoon, that it's remarkable to see a community rally around something like that, and around their school, and around what's going on in their school. And I think it becomes part of the community when you see these types of things happening. I too believe some of the same things Mark does, that we need a strong education system for the economic success of our state. We do rank very high in education in the nation, right? A report just came out that we're #2 in the nation for ACT scores. So we continually are ranked in the top in the nation. Fox Valley is some of the finest schools in the state, and I intend to make sure that we continue with that.
Well, I'm Amanda Stuck, and I actually was born and raised in Appleton, so I attended public schools in Appleton, graduated from Appleton North High School. I then went on to graduate from UW Oshkosh with a master's degree in public administration. And my connection now is that my husband and I are raising 4 children that attend public schools in Appleton. So they're attending the same school as I did, and I know when I went there I received a really great education. And one of the reasons why I'm running is to make sure that our 4 kids now have the same opportunity to get the best education here. I've also served on the Diverse Populations Board at Fox Valley Technical College, so I know the value of our K-12 system as well as our technical colleges and our 4-year colleges. Having spent some time on economic development in my master's program, I know that education is the #1 investment we can make in our economy. So this is a really important issue, and I'm glad the league brought us all here today to talk about this topic.
Thank you. We'll move on to question 2. And we've heard a lot about the funding, and that's probably where we need to begin. With the way the state is funding education now, we've had historic budget cuts in 2008, and expansion of competing programs such as private charters and voucher payments. Do you have concerns about maintaining the Constitution's mandate to establish district schools as nearly uniform as practicable? What is your comment about that, and how are you going to fulfill that Constitution's goal in the realm of funding? We're going to start with Assembly District 55, Mark Westfall, and then go to 57, Senate District 19, and then Assembly District 5. So, Mark.
All right, let me make sure I understand the question. Could you-
Oh, sure. Okay, we're talking about budget cuts, the challenges that school districts are facing with budget cuts. What is your plan for school budgets and what are you thinking?
And is the funding formula coming
The
up?
funding formula and
Well-
as well as payments that are going out to
I got it.
vouchers and charges. Okay.
For one thing, we've already cut the budgets way too much in the last few years. When we cut $800 million several years ago, that was the largest single cut, not only in Wisconsin's history, but in national as well. We have to make a concentrated effort to bring those funding levels back to what they were. As far as the state formula goes, I believe we need to follow something close to what Superintendent Tony Evers has suggested, which takes into account income levels for the students based on what they receive as far as free lunches and other programs. We also need to take into account how far they travel to and from school. We have to take all of those things into account and then have an equalization. Rural districts are suffering more than districts, say, around in the Fox Valley area because of the low property values and the depressed situations that some of them face. We've got to try to do everything we can to keep education as equalized as possible, and so every student across Wisconsin has the same opportunities, whether they go to school in Appleton or Neenah or somewhere up in the northwest or in the central part of the state. We have kind of lost our focus on school funding and keeping our education system funded properly. We have to regain that focus and do what we need. As I said earlier, education is our key to so many things, both economically and in the state.
And Mike, and I'll just remind everyone that we're doing a minute and a half for the questions after the first 2 minutes. So a minute and a half. And Mike.
Thank you. First off, as I'd say, and I mentioned this when I was talking a few minutes ago, but education is foundational for a community, and it's both for the kids, it's for our future, it's also for job creation. If you don't have solid education at all levels, public, private, K through 12, the high school or technical colleges, the 2- and 4-year degree schools, then we won't have the great quality of life that we do have here in the Fox cities. We won't have the great education systems that I believe we currently have, and also the job opportunities that we have. So education to me is extremely important. In terms of the funding, that's something that I definitely will want to take a look at when in Madison. I want to ensure that we do fund the public schools appropriately and properly so that they can provide that strong educational foundation. The other thing, though, I would say is, though, that you always have to balance what you want to do from a funding standpoint with fiscal responsibility about what we can afford or may not be able to afford. So, provided, but I do believe education is a top priority for the budget, and it would be something that I will put significant time into. I am open also to looking at the funding formula. I think that there could be maybe some better alternatives to spread that out so certain areas aren't disadvantaged as they may currently be.
All right. Well, this is a really important issue. We do need to make sure our schools are funded fully. And as Mark had brought up, I think the fair funding for our future plan that has been put forward is a really good plan to address that issue. Helps to make sure that our schools equally get funding, but it also holds the line of property taxes, because when we actually raise that state aid, it would help to reduce taxes a little bit. So it's a really good plan all the way around, and it really addresses a lot of the issues we talked about in the beginning. We talked about the issues around funding.
And Roger.
Don't I get to go next?
Go on.
I mean, I'm fine if Roger goes,
Yes.
but I feel left out.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I really want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, now I feel a little slighted, but that's okay. It's a good catch. You know, one thing is our imbalance with our funding, with our revenue and expenses. Right now, state, we have our expenses at the consumer price index for employees, but our revenues are much less. So to find a balance there is what's going to be important for us. You know, put simply, we have an expense of 1.4% and a revenue of 0.75%. So there's an imbalance. We have to make sure that we have a proper funding mechanism in place, realign that so they're at least equal somewhere. But overall, funding for our public schools is important. And I mean, there's some of the things that have already been said. I mean, I don't need to repeat over and over, but definitely we need to find a formula that's certainly going to be more effective than what we have right now.
Roger?
Now, Roger, you can go.
All right, thank you. I just want to first say that I think it's important that we recognize how many teachers do we have in here. You can just show of hands if you're a teacher. Okay, quite a few. Administrators, school board members out there. Okay, a few too. I think it's important that we realize that we're asking more of our teachers than we ever have before. I think a lot's changed since those of us up here at the panel have gone to school, or even when our parents have gone to school. You know, kids are going, we're expecting our teachers to discipline, they've got to look out for the welfare of students, make sure that they're clothed, make sure that they're fed, make sure that they have, you know, proper instruments to do their homework when they go home. Just simple things that I don't know if we, you know, teachers had to deal with in times past. So I just want to say that first and foremost. Second, when it comes to funding of schools, I think that is important. It is a priority. That's what we're charged with when we go down to Madison is, you know, we only have so much revenue coming in, and we have to prioritize how that goes out. I would guess, if I just had to look at it now, that, you know, the state aids in schools will be increased over the next biennium. That's just my gut feeling when I look at it now. But I also think it's important to note, if you look at what we spend on education compared to the rest of the world, I mean, we're always spend year in and year out, and I know as a nation, more on public education than we ever have before. I think we also have to look at alternatives. How else, in a changing educational environment, how else can we make sure that we bring reforms to help kids learn in our current environment?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Education is the #1 issue in our state. It has been cut with its funding for a number of years now, and I believe the funding should be restored. That means we have to be fiscally responsible in other places. We should look carefully at Superintendent Evers' formula that he has put forward. He has some significant changes that would help us to try to equalize how schools receive their aid. I think we need to look at the revenue caps that have been put in place, because some schools were capped at a very low spending level, some capped at a higher spending level. We have to find a way to adjust that. Then the other thing I think that would be really important for us to look at is to consider early childhood education as part of our school programs. Because when you start kids early, really early, they do much better throughout all of school. And as a physical therapist who worked with early childhood kids, I could see the difference from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year, and I knew that those kids would do better their next year in school, and they would continue to do better every year after that. And so it's very important that we look at the beginning part of school and make sure that we focus in on helping kids to be able to be in the classroom and be successful while they're in the classroom. And one of the really interesting things is there's a study that shows that if kids can restrain themselves as young kids, they do 100% better throughout all of their education levels and in their workforce, in the workplace. So I say we should focus on some early childhood.
Okay, Jim.
Well, obviously funding our schools at a level that's appropriate is important. It's something I support going into the next budget. I support an increase in funding for public education. A little quick, brief look back in the history before in Governor Doyle's last term when the recession hit. It had a dramatic impact on state finances. One of the things that the governor said, had not the federal government stepped in and infused money into the state budget, there would have been massive cuts to education during Governor Doyle's tenure. Now you fast forward a couple of years, our finances are by and large the same, but we didn't have that infusion of federal money. So we had to make some tough decisions. Education is the biggest part of the state budget, so that was going to be affected one way or another. What we try to do is give school districts the tools to help offset those costs. Now, I'm proud to say that by and large, I think it's worked, but going into the next session, I do think we have to look at the aid formula for the schools. It's one thing I did do with Tony Evers' plan. There was a piece of that I took and made into legislation where we looked at the levy credit that disproportionately hurts schools in Northeast Wisconsin. So that's one of the things I looked at. I'll still continue to push for that as we try to roll back that levy credit to increase funding for our schools in Northeast Wisconsin.
Okay, Jeff?
Well, it's nice to hear that we all agree, public education is the cornerstone of our democracy here. And so it needs to be protected. Unfortunately, some of the tools that we were given is now causing districts to go out and do referendums to bring their funding up to levels so that they can have proper class sizes. One of the things that I got involved in, going back to when I was, my kids were in school, before I got on the school board, they asked me what they call village partnership. And the whole premise there is that it takes a village to raise a child. And it really does, and that's what education is all about. We can help with putting, restoring the funds back to to the public schools. We also need to look at our communities, because as Penny said, do they come, ready to learn and those types of things. Helping our kids do better in school is taking a look at the whole child. And where are they spending their time before school, after school? How are we helping them in those earlier years? Kaukauna has a nice library program where they start reading and having kids in for programs at age 4. I really like to see us expand those kind of programs and get kids learning early, get them involved. And that also gets the parents involved, because they need their parents' involvement through the whole process as well.
Okay, for question 3, we are going to start with Chris in Assembly District 57 and go to Senate District 19, and then Assembly District 5, and then Assembly District 55. How will you help schools deal with the unreimbursed costs for special education that districts bear, that Jim has been talking about in his notes? And so we'll start with Chris.
Well, the Supreme Court ruled that we need to adequately fund our public or our special education, and adequately is a kind of one of those unique words that it's you can decide how you want to use it. My mom was a special ed teacher in Milwaukee Public Schools, so I saw exactly what some of the issues that our special ed teachers, special ed classes are seeing these days. And it is difficult, and we do need to continue to fund it. And we do need to make sure, and categories keep increasing for special ed. And I know in the city of Menasha, where I live, our public school, we have a high incidence of poverty. We have a high incidence of transient families. So kids don't get education like you would in, say, a traditional school district. We have a high incidence of free lunch. So it's difficult when you're in an environment like that, when you don't get kids with consistent family backgrounds. But we do need to continue to fund them, and we do need to make sure that these kids have an equal opportunity and chances as every other kid does in public education.
Well, it comes back to the fact that we need to make funding our schools fully a priority in our budget. And when we say funding our schools, that includes funding for special education. And make sure we know what those costs are, make sure we're including those in our formulas, we're making sure our schools are funded fully, and all around just making sure it's a priority when we are making our budgets.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Special education is a very expensive aspect of our school system, and the public schools are required to accept all students and to educate every student that crosses their doorway. So they must put forward an effort to do that. It's very difficult, very costly. I think there's a couple of things that we could do. We need to work very closely with the federal government to make sure that the cost sharing of the education is more adequate from the federal government. We also have to focus in, as I said before, on early childhood, because really when you get the kids, even with special education problems, you identify them early, you start them with a program early, you do this pre-screenings for any kind of reading problem or dyslexia problem or any other kind of problem that you might see that comes forward early in a child's educational career, they do much better. And then there's another issue that's very important part of the formula for special education, and that's called the maintenance of effort. And that's getting into the weeds a little bit, but it's a very important issue because the maintenance of effort requires that the school system spend the same amount of money every year, even if they don't have the same number of special ed kids. And so that makes it very difficult for the schools to adjust their funding formula at the school level. So I would figure out a way to fix that. We tried that a couple times last year, trying to figure out a way to do that, and I think that would help us very much in the special education system.
I think this question is a lot like the first. How do we find funding for public education, including special education? Again, the legislature, we have one job really we prioritize. And you all pay your property tax, you all pay your income taxes, you all pay your gasoline taxes, and that money goes down, our parts would go down to Madison, and that's what we prioritize when we're paying for everything we have in our state, from our health care to our roads and to our schools. So when we're talking about putting more money in there, I think we'd all, I don't think anyone up here wants to not give enough money, for what educators think they need. Again, it just comes down to prioritization. I think some of the things we could look at, school districts, for instance, have to take care of transportation, they have to take care of busing. Well, that really has nothing to do with in-classroom education, but it's just something that they have to do. Maybe we could find a way to take that off of their backs, let them take that money and put it towards special education. So maybe we can tweak the things that we're charging them to take care of, and see if there's any cost savings there or any ways that we're able to influx more dollars that way.
Jeff?
I have to agree with everything we've heard here. It's where do you find more money? Roger's right, it's a matter of priorities. And as I heard kind of everybody up here agreeing, education has to be one of our #1 priorities. Well, as I said, when we were in village partnership, it takes a village to raise a child. And one of the other things we talked about when I was on the Kaukauna School Board was everybody can learn. So it is our responsibility, every student that comes to us, whether it's special needs or reduced lunch and all the other things you hear about, it doesn't matter. We need to look at that child and say they can learn. And it's our role to figure out how to help them and how they best learn, and then adapt our system to meet that. That's pretty challenging. And some of that means we've got to look at how do we prioritize. School boards have to look at how they prioritize their need. Not just as a state legislator how much they're going to send us, but each school board has to look and say, here's the pot of money we have. We have to have a balanced budget every year, and we did it. And you prioritize it. And like Connie said, some years you have to put more into special education just based on the number of kids you have or whatever. Every child is important. Every child can learn. That's the responsibility of that local school board to make those kind of decisions. And the government has to help us with some of those. And any way, suggestions people have, I would be open to listen to.
This is an interesting question. I spent a lot of time in the schools over the course of the last 3.5 years meeting with administrators on a pretty regular basis, at least 4 or 5 times a year on average, and really proud of Kaukauna schools and especially in their special education programs there. So this isn't an issue that I've heard from our administrators. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's not an issue. It's just new to me. One of the things that maybe we could possibly look at is a categorical aid. If we really want to get directly to the special ed students, and especially to the schools that have a higher proportion of them, maybe we could look at a special categorical aid, especially for those kids if that's not already in place. to make sure that that aid is getting directly to schools that have a disproportionately high number of special ed students.
Everybody said, I think, a lot of good ideas about this, and it obviously providing education to this group of individuals is very important. And I can speak personally to that because, like I mentioned maybe earlier, I mentioned that our younger son benefited from some special needs speech therapy classes when he was very young. You would never know it now because he's a very accomplished singer and he's in theater and everything, but if it wasn't for those programs that existed, you know, he wouldn't have developed, I think, those skills as rapidly. So I know firsthand how important some of those programs can be, and I do want to ensure that we continue those in some way. As we've all talked about, many have mentioned, you know, the budget we have to prioritize. I think Jim's got an interesting idea on the categorization idea. I also think that, you know, this is maybe an area that schools, and that maybe it's being done, but maybe it's something that schools could be working more with communities and with parents to also help this situation. For example, the YMCAs and the Boys and Girls Clubs in this area provide both before care, after care to many kids whose parents are working, you know, because of working 2 jobs. Maybe there's a way educators could partner with those organizations to provide some training and provide some help, particularly for special needs kids. So I think let's look to our communities to try to solve this, not just to the education process as well.
I absolutely believe that we have to have the funding for special education. My experience in my real life tells me that if we don't take care of a problem early at the beginning and take it care of, we're going to pay for it even more on the back end. We owe it to these young people to give them every opportunity they can so that they can be fully functional citizens. Otherwise, we're going to be supporting them in other ways when they become adults. We need to give them the schooling and the education and the training so that they can be employable and self-sufficient. As I said, otherwise we'll be taking care of them other ways. As far as priorities, I don't necessarily know that taking $800 million out of education fund and giving tax breaks to millionaires and multi-profitable corporations is really a good priority. It wouldn't be one of my priorities. So that's how I would handle the funding situation for special education.